The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
And welcome back to part 2 of our episode with Pete Anderson at Pareidolia Brewing in Sebastian. This is the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. This is Dave, your host and author. Let's get right into it. If you didn't listen to part 1, I recommend that you do so because it does give you a good background of Pareidolia Brewing and a lot of the things that Pete did to create a very viable, wonderful, strong craft beer brewery, business, and scene in Sebastian. This episode is going to be a little bit more legalese. This episode is going to focus a lot on his time at the Florida Brewers Guild, working with the guild and trying to change some of the laws that we have here in the state of Florida. Some changes came through years and years and years ago, but there are some other changes that still need to occur to really give Florida craft brewers a more favorable position in the marketplace, shall we say. So that's what we're going to be chatting about right now, and let's just get right into it. Pete Anderson, Pareidolia Brewing, enjoy. As you scale up to 5 barrels, you have some distribution, some light distribution. Did you ever really want that, or was this always meant to be just like we had in the strip mall, only maybe more of a selection?
I knew that distribution is not like a big money maker for the scale that we're doing, but I also know that we wanted our beer at least locally on tap with all the bars and restaurants along the riverfront here. We definitely wanted enough to put out there. So that was part of the plan. We just didn't know how much. So we still only distribute probably 40% of what we brew, but our wholesale has been picking up significantly. We're now on tap, which still blows me away when I say it, but we're on tap now from St. Augustine to Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
And in Orlando, and then the Space Coast and Treasure Coast. So, you know, we may be small, but we're utilizing the space we have. We've done some equipment upgrades. We're getting some more upgrades coming in anticipation of doubling our fermentation. So right now we've got just under 30 barrels worth of ferment. And we're scaling up within the next probably year and a half to go up to 50 barrels, which is still small in the big scheme of things. But for a brew pub, where most of our sales are coming out of the tap room, 50 barrels is going to be fine for us.
No, absolutely. And obviously, with more space and more taps comes more variety. So how difficult was it to branch beyond your standard bud clones at the old location? And obviously you've got even more here. And I was actually very amazed and very happy to see some of the styles that you have up on tap. How is that a continued selling that you have to do for the community?
At this point, we've spoiled our customers. The upside of not being a production brewery is we only have a few core brands that we send out. And as long as we keep those in inventory, the wholesale side of things is fine, which leaves us wide open for in-house. We can brew anything we want, literally. There's no board of directors. There's no, let's sit down and have a meeting for an hour and discuss this. It's like, hey, what haven't you had in a while? Or, hey, I just drank this really great white stout that somebody did. Let's make a white stout. So really, it's a combination of front house staff, Lynn, myself, friends, people giving good suggestions, or we're out trying a beer somewhere in a style we've never had, which is hard to find because we've drank beer a long period of time. But with the evolution now of craft beer, there's so many new approaches to old styles. The advantages of a small brewery is we're adaptable. We were the only craft seltzer being distributed on the Treasure Coast for a while.
Interesting.
Yeah, which I mean, for a while, everybody was making seltzers. Had I known how easy it was, I would have done it earlier, but
You were the first person to say that it's easy. I've spoken to so many brewers that say that it's more difficult than making beer for some reason.
If I could sell as much seltzer as beer, I would do it every day. It's so easy. So easy. But I predicted a couple years ago that it was going to run the same way Zima and wine coolers did. So I was a little late in the game because I was reluctant to dive into it. Once I learned how easy it was to make, I said, oh, let's give it a go. And it was really popular. The distributor's like, hey, we heard you have a seltzer. Can we send some out? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. So we did a few batches, but then it just literally went from going through a keg or two a night to a keg or two a week to like, okay, this stuff's just not moving anymore. That ship had sailed.
Yeah.
So
I think there's always going to be a market for it, especially here in Florida, due to the calorie conscious crowd.
Sure.
But I definitely think that it's hit its high water mark and it's starting to roll back.
Oh, yeah.
now.
There's only a couple of big players left in the game now. And I feel bad for the companies that decided to retool their whole operations thinking this is like the next big thing. I didn't go that route. We didn't have to modify anything. Like I said, if I knew how easy seltzers were when they first came out, I would have been pumping them out. But I know some people are anti, like, I'll never do that. That's fine. Everybody's entitled to it. But as a business owner, I'm like, what do they want? What do the customers want? Oh, they want a seltzer. Okay, well, let's make a good one. Oh, they want this kind of beer. Let's make a good one.
Yeah. Well, with some of the other styles, like what do you get asked for? What pushes, what gets pushed by the customers, even though you may not be necessarily interested in making or drinking it yourself?
Sours are kind of a funny thing for us here. We do kettle sours a couple times a year, but our demographic isn't a real big sour beer consumer. But we do have people come in looking for sours. So we try to have at least one or two on if we can.
Yeah, that was the most interesting thing about the Treasure Coast Beer Fest is maybe one sour was there.
Yeah.
Maybe two.
Yeah. We had a sour we did on tap at the winery where the event was because we fermented that one on their grapes.
Yeah, it's kind of a requirement.
So we didn't put it on at the tent because I didn't want to interfere with their sales up at the counter. But yeah, there are other breweries in the area who do more sours, but my finding is that when you've got a younger demographic, sours are like really popular.
Yeah.
But if I had more than 2 sours on here, they would probably go out of date. Even if they were the best sours anybody's ever had, it's just not what our client base is looking for mostly.
Yeah, and let's flip from one Florida trend to the other one, which is, of course, dessert stouts.
Okay.
And I know you've got one on Nitro right now. Do those tend to move here?
Yes, they do.
Gotcha.
Because it's something different. And when I said earlier that, our customers have gotten spoiled, it went from you guys are never going to survive in this Bud Light town when we first opened to people coming in twice in 1 week saying, what's new? I'm like, you were just here on Tuesday. It's now Thursday, and you're asking if I have a new beer. You're spoiled.
Yeah.
I don't just pump beer out, in a day. It takes a couple of weeks to get new beers out there. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing. There's more breweries around. We have another brewery around the corner, Mash Monkeys. So while we were early in the game, we're not having to really educate people anymore. Now it's a matter of maintaining their interest and just making a high quality product. That's what's going to keep any brewery in business now. The competition is so great with over 9,500 breweries nationwide, almost 400 in Florida. It used to be brew it and they will come. If you don't make good product now, it's going to come back and haunt you. You have to make high quality product. There's too many other options available. You go to liquor store now, 10 years ago, liquor store in Florida, your selection was pretty slim.
Yeah.
You go in there now and there's a lot of packaged beer out there. So if you're not making good product in your tap room, they can go get good product in cans.
Mm-hmm.
So the competition has definitely stepped up. But from day one, when we first opened, I think if we had to summarize our approach to beer, balanced, drinkable beer. And for a long time, we didn't do anything crazy. We just made, a good American amber, make an IPA, make a good pale ale, make a good cream ale. Have your light offerings, your dark offerings, but don't get crazy with it. We were in a town that didn't have a brewery before, so we had to be conscious of that. But it was really fun to watch over the course of years, our customers, many of whom were retired, to them, beer was lager. That was it. Yeah. And then to look over, 6 months after we opened, they've got a dark beer in front of them, and they're enjoying it. It was really cool to watch that evolution. And it was really just came down to, hey, if you expose people to good product, they'll realize there's way more out there than they knew. And so for us, it's been fun to watch that transition happen to where I feel like our customers now are pretty savvy. They'll know if a beer's off. They'll know they'll tell me if they're out, in their travels. Well, we had a beer that something was wrong with it. But I also feel like they're pretty cool customers that they're not going to go online and just trash that brewery. Mm-hmm. They know that sometimes things happen. Everybody's got batches that they're less than proud of. It happens. But I feel like we have pretty educated, for a small town now, we have pretty educated palates around here for craft beer.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Now.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Now, obviously, they may be sophisticated and educated, but it looks like the laws in the state of Florida, maybe not so much. And you've been doing a lot of work with the Florida Brewers Guild trying to get some of those laws changed to support businesses such as yourself.
We just are trying to level the playing field a little bit post-prohibition. It's been a minute. There's been plenty of time. 39 states have already modified their laws to be a little more fair to each of the 3-tier system. You either brew it, distribute it, or retail it. For those who maybe don't know what that 3-tier system is out there. But in Florida, it's very heavily slanted towards the distributors. The biggest single thing, two big, huge things. First one is you can't self-distribute your beer in Florida. So if a bar across the street wants your beer and they ran out on a Friday night, you can't just send them a keg. They've got to call the distributor. The distributor's got to see if it's in inventory, and then they've got to go to their warehouse and bring it back, even if this bar is across the street, literally. Yeah. So there's the first thing. Even if we just had limited self-distribution up to a certain barrel amount or a geographical radius, hey, you can self-distribute within 25 miles of where the product's made, something like that. Each state has its own versions of what they will allow, but 39 states do have some form. We have none. The other big thing is the franchise agreements. When you sign up with a distributor, it's for the life of your company. And this is advice for any new brewer out there or brewery in planning, thinking about getting into distribution. Just realize when you sign that agreement, it is for the life of your company. So Bob's Brewery signs with XYZ distributor. Bob's Brewery is now owned by XYZ distributor. They can sell you like a commodity. They can not do a good job for you, and you have very little recourse. There's a great article that just came out with the Miami or MIA Brewing.
Yeah, Eddie Leon just had a huge...
That's getting big coverage because he's a poster child for what happens when a distributor stops doing their job. He can't even sell beer in his own town. So he's selling his beer outside of the state just to move it. And now there's apparently a lawsuit between those two entities, the distributor and the brewer. And you boil it down and say, all right, well, the brewery created the brand, made the product, packaged the product. The distributor's only job was to get that product from point A to point B. And when that fails, there's no recourse because the law in Florida says you are bound to that distributor for life.
And what amazes me is that when a distributor closes operations like Brown did up in Orlando some years ago, they will sell that contract to another distributor that you have no say in, you have no input in, but you are now bound to that new distributor.
Correct.
I don't understand how is this fair to businesses? How is this fair to breweries?
It's not fair to breweries. This part of the law apparently was in the 80s, written in the 80s, when there were not a lot of breweries around and the distributors were maybe carrying one brand. We'll just say AB. If all they carried was AB products, the fear was, what if AB pulls out? I'm a distributor now and I have no product. So that law was written to protect that distributor. But the game has changed dramatically. There are so many more breweries and distributors now. And they're all carrying big portfolios of multiple breweries. So it's really a stroke of the pen to get rid of that. But the legislation is not there.
Why is it not moving? Why is this sort of, I'll say anti-business legislation for small businesses? Why is it still on the books, and why is it so difficult to remove this?
The simple answer is, when you have all the cards, do you really want to change the rules of the game? And the distributors fight tooth and nail against the craft brewing industry that's carrying them. The big boys, the big brands now nationwide, industrial loggers, those brands have been continually losing share. They're still huge. They're still way bigger than craft, but they've been continuing to lose share every year as more and more people get turned on to good tasting, interesting beers, quality beers. So all these distributors are making money off of our creativity and our innovations. Yet at the same time, they've got their foot on our neck saying, well, yeah, we're going to make money off you, but don't try to get anything back out of this. And I'm not, people sometimes say, why are you such a distributor hater? Why do you hate distributors? I don't hate distributors. They perform a service that many of us rely on. They're needed. The problem is when I can't choose. Like you said, if you're sold as a commodity to another distributorship that you have no relationship with, you may have never even had a conversation with those people. You know nothing about them, yet you're going to take something you've sunk your life savings into, and now you're stuck with them, for better or for worse. That's not small business. That's not pro small business. That's not even free market. None of those things apply here. You're an indentured servant at that point. I know people who've closed their brewery, rebranded as a new company, relicensed their new brewery to get out of a bad distributor relationship.
And that's not exactly cheap.
No, it's expensive. It's super involved. I mean, to think you're basically reopening your business. And the only reason you're doing it is because you have a bad distributor. They could easily say, all right, well, let's put contract language in the law that says each franchise agreement is reevaluated every 5 years. Put a time limit on there.
Yeah.
5 years is far more reasonable. It gives the distributor time to really figure out if this brand is working for them. And it figures out for the brewery whether that distributor is getting their beer where they want and they're all accomplishing the goals they want. But it's so anti-competitive, especially as some of the smaller distributors start falling off and there's only a few big ones. Now there's even fewer distributors that the small guys can go to. So it's definitely anti-competitive. It's anti-small business, 100%.
So what do we do?
Well, the Guild has been pushing for changes. This year, we don't have the controversial bills out there. Apparently, from the top down in Tallahassee, in so many words, we were told anything controversial in this industry this year is not going to even get looked at. So they told us to shelf it this year. And I'll be honest with you, that's what they said last year. So as a member of the board on the Florida Brewers Guild and a committee member of the legislative committee, I am personally talking to these legislators who all say they support craft beer, they support small business, but where the rubber meets the road, I'm not seeing any of them standing up and shouting, yes, craft beer deserves better. None of them. So what we're trying to do with our website and our campaign right now from the Guild is freedom4beer.com. Folks can go on there, find out who their legislators are. There's links to that. We have a PC, political committee. I guess you can't call it a PAC because it's not national, but gotcha. It's essentially a PAC where we are stockpiling some money where we can help campaigns of those who do support us. If that's the way the machine works, let's get in the game because distributors are donating to campaigns all over the place. Craft breweries, we're small. A lot of us are, operating on very minimal margins. But if our customers I think we're working on a campaign right now. It hasn't been formalized, but hey, buy a pint and donate a pint. So when you're sitting at your favorite local brewery, buying a beer, go on your phone, go to freedom4beer.com, give $5 to us. If 300 breweries had 1,000 people or 500 people each give $5, we would have some political clout. And I know nobody wants to say that out loud, but if you can't help somebody's campaign, chances of them helping you are slim to none. And this is my personal experience with going up to Tallahassee and talking to these people. If you have a lot of money, they'll sit down and talk to you. They'll maybe even champion your cause. But right now, I don't feel like we really have those people in Tallahassee. They're supporting small changes, but nothing significant that's going to change the industry. And what we're pushing for are industry changing. They're fair. It will strengthen the industry. Craft beer last year in Florida was over a $4 billion impact on Florida's economy. I mean, what other multi-billion-dollar industry doesn't even get invited to sit at the table? I hear about the FRLA, which is Florida Restaurant Lodging Association. Their lobby group, when they're in Tallahassee, they went out shooting on a ranch with the Cattlemen's Association and the governor. We go up there and we can't even get them to come to a local brewery to sit down and talk to us. So there's got to be a paradigm shift here pretty soon.
Do we think, in your opinion, do you think that craft beer in Florida is kind of falling behind the rest of the nation because of some of the laws that we have that aren't being changed?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The antiquated laws that we have right now are not only suppressing growth of existing breweries, it's limiting options. You've probably noticed it. I've noticed it. You go into grocery stores, liquor stores now, they used to have a lot more selection.
They used to have a lot of selection. And I go to other states and just the selection's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going back to, 20 years ago when I lived in Eastern Washington, I had 2 full cooler aisles of a grocery store of nothing but local beer. That was 20 years ago. You go into a local grocery store now, you got 6 feet of cooler space.
And unfortunately, those 6 feet are mostly taken up with brands that look like craft.
Crafty. I call it crafty.
Yeah, craft-esque.
Yes.
But you and I know where those purse strings are.
Yes. No, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. They pose themselves as craft beer, but they're owned by multi-billion-dollar conglomerate corporations. I just use the term industrial beer. Industrial beer is large-scale produced beer. And you can have craft beer, Sam Adams and Dogfish Head and Cigar City. Those are all, big operations, but they're still craft. But when, they're owned by one of the 3 biggest breweries in the world and with pretty packaging shoved in there next to your local brewery, that's been going on for years though. But yeah, it's unfortunate. I think that we're way behind. We were way behind when I moved here 20 something years ago. And we've come a long way. I think Florida, in the amount of time since we've been open, it's an incredible amount of growth, but we still have a long way to go. And if these laws were changed, self-distribution, working relationships with distributors, the restaurants, bars, retailers would have so many more local options for tourists that come to our state. Florida's known for tourism. One of the first things people ask when they go to a local bar or restaurant, what's local? What do you have local that we can try? And they're limited by what that distributor will carry. That's it. They make that ultimate decision. Unless you have a great distributor. Like we have good distributors. We're with Three Mavens and we're with JJ Taylor, and we have great working relationships with both of them. We had a prior distributorship that allowed me to put into my contract and out. And when they ghosted me and picked up 3 times in 1 year, I exercised that. Good. So for those of you out there, if you're looking to sign up with a distributor, put in there what you would like in your contract. It doesn't hurt to ask. They may not honor it. They may say, no, go pound sand. But if they're a small distributorship that's trying to get a bigger portfolio, think about it this way. If you're a small distributorship and everybody in Florida is already wrapped up for life, what are your options to run your business as a small distributor? So the changes are actually good for the distributors as well, because then somebody who has a bad relationship can end that contract and sign up with a new one, opening up some brands for smaller distributorships that maybe couldn't get to them before.
Yeah.
So it's just good all the way around. So the Guild is working diligently. The board of directors, there's the Freedom for Beer campaign. They just were up in Tallahassee again last week. I was up there last month. So we are going up there. We're meeting people. We're shaking hands. We're trying to gather support. But the biggest thing that's really going to help us is our craft beer customers. There's a lot of them and they vote. And my whole thing has always been, hey, don't vote for somebody who doesn't support your local brewery, because your local brewery is providing jobs, taxes, charities, all the things we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
If they can't support that, what are they supporting? The opposite of that.
Exactly.
Big companies, big corporations. So, craft beer fans are smarter than that. I think that they know that they can make a difference.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate it. And hopefully we can get those differences made a little bit sooner rather than later.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
And so there we go with Pete Anderson, Pareidolia Brewing, longtime friend of the show. Been waiting to get him on. And now that he's on, it was literally exactly what I was hoping for and more. So it was a great conversation. He's got a beautiful, beautiful location right by the ocean. The outdoor area was just wonderful. We were kind of sitting out there, chatting, just enjoying a nice, gorgeous, sunny Florida morning that wasn't too hot when we spoke to him, which was absolutely great. Next week, we will have another episode for you. Where is it? What is it going to be? What are we going to be talking about? You're just going to have to wait and see. But if you want to know when it comes out, the best place to go is social media. We're at FL Beer Blog on Facebook, Florida Beer Blog on Instagram and Twitter, on the internet at floridabeerpodcast.com and floridabeerblog.com, which we update on a regular basis. We've got plenty of Pareidolia Brewing beers that are coming up pretty soon, which is awesome. You can also subscribe to us on the podcasting app of your choice, and if you can, please give us a nice, juicy 5-star review. That really does help us when it comes to getting the word out about the podcast and Florida craft beer in general. We are a proud member of the Florida Podcast Network. If you can do so, please head over to floridapodcastnetwork.com to check out the other amazing shows that are on the network. We are also on Facebook at FPN Insiders, and that'll give you the inside scoop as to all the new shows that are coming to the network. Next week, we will see you again. Don't know where, but you're going to like it. Our intro announcer is Jeff Brozovich. Field producer is Steve Pekala. Executive producer for the Florida Podcast Network and Grand High Poobah is Jemmy Legagneur. This is David Butler, your host and author. We will see you next week. And if you've been to Pareidolia Brewing in Sebastian, it's just a short hop, skip, and a jump away to our next brewery. If you know who that is, hang tight. You're going to be happy, obviously. This is David Butler, your host and author. Thank you so much. We will see you, and drink Florida Craft.